Did you know that mild traumatic brain injuries can actually be catastrophic lifelong injuries? It's something that the label mild TBI comes up in almost every TBI case, and the way that it's used often is used to overdefine the long-term severity of a case. And so when a client suffers a traumatic brain injury, also sometimes called a concussion, and they have a series of things, which I'm not going to get into in this video, it's for another video, but the idea is if you get the qualification of a mild traumatic brain injury, some get better, a majority actually get better. However, there are what's known as the miserable minority that have long-term permanent, life-altering consequences, and that's what I want to talk about here. Everyone thinks because of the term mild, it is not a permanent or significant result. The issue that we end up having is with a mild traumatic brain injury, it's called a mild because the initial snapshot is what determines mild, moderate, or severe, is whether they were unconscious for a period of more than 30 minutes or not, if their objective findings on the brain scans, those will tend to be the more moderate, or if they're unconscious for more than 24 hours, if they're unresponsive or in a coma, those can be severe, at least according to some of the guidelines. But what can happen is if you are unconscious for a brief period of time, under 30 minutes, or even not unconscious, you can still have a mild traumatic brain injury, which can have significant long-term complications. I started working on this case that was defined as a mild traumatic brain injury where the guy got shot in the face with a commercial water hose. It was a sewer cleaner, hit him in the face, jerked his head back. He was diagnosed with a mild traumatic brain injury, but he had significant long-term consequences. And he wasn't unconscious. He was driving a vehicle. He continued to drive. He continued to work. But he was an individual who built his own house with his own bare hands from scratch. Other than have someone pour the concrete for the foundation, he was the one that quite literally put nails in the house to build it. And after this injury, he had trouble doing second grade math homework, where before he has vaulted ceilings because he designed and he built them. So this is the kind of thing you will see in mild traumatic brain injuries where they still try and do day-to-day life. He was still driving. He was still working as a plumber. However, his life was significantly impaired. He couldn't cook anymore. If he'd go in the kitchen, he would try and make tea, like loose leaf tea. He burned all the water out of his pan and then burned his pan and the smoke alarm went off. This is someone that has day-to-day pretty significant impairment, however, is doing everything he can to make his life seem normal. And so that plumber, when the defense basically saw that it was a mild traumatic brain injury, they assumed the long-term complications were mild, and they didn't value the case almost at all. We ended up going to trial and getting a pretty significant mid-seven-figure verdict, and the reason was, truthfully, he was long-term permanently impaired. Even one of the defense experts, when crossed on the stand at the end of trial, said this. I said, "Doctor, isn't it true that if you look at your testing and just your testing, this is signs of long-term cognitive impairment so significant that if you believe your testing, he would need to be having someone care for him for the rest of his life?" The doctor looked and tried to avoid the question, but then eventually was like, yes. And it was from a mild traumatic brain injury. So more than anything, don't rely on the initial medical classification, because relying on the initial medical classification is the way that you fall in the trap of using an initial snapshot to determine long-term outcome. What you want to do is focus on the actual symptoms, the actual impairment, the actual day-to-day ways that their life is significantly changed. And that's how you take this mild traumatic brain injury and show the jury, really, this is a catastrophic injury.